Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning into This Week on Martha's Vineyard. I'm your host, Emmeline Breed, and we're going to dive right into your top headlines for this week. The island of Martha's Vineyard is rebuilding after being battered repeatedly by storms. As you may have seen a couple of weeks ago, they were already rebuilding South Beach with donated Christmas trees from members of the community to try to rebuild those dunes. But the second storm has come back, as we all well know, and the island is now trying to rebuild. Now, unfortunately, looking at the rest of the winter, it does look like it's going to continue to be a rough one that will be expected to batter the island. But as islanders have said repeatedly, and they've shown up in person to show this, they are committed to rebuilding the island and will be for the foreseeable future. So, diving into today after these headlines, Colin, I wanted to just say thank you so much for having me today to talk about the MOMMJ documentary. As you guys can see today, normally I'm dressed up, makeup, kind of have it together. But today I'm coming to you real as, just a mom at the end of her day. Because that's kind of the point of the MOMMJ documentary is going back into it. So, Colin, again, thank you. And I know as a dad, this is something that definitely resonated with you.
Actually, I'm a dad MJ, I guess, but yeah, I'm also at the end of a day too. We're in our winter garb. Me and Mike here, we came off a construction crew and came into here, so we're familiar with that mode. I was actually just thinking about have you ever seen the Hillbilly Weatherman? Have you ever seen that?
No, that's hilarious.
I know. I almost feel like we should have something like that because it's very popular actually. But the weather on the vineyard is so unique and so different. Like if we had to in fact, it's so different that when the newspaper we used to have the weather on the cover, the 7-day forecast, and it was always different than what everybody was predicting because the weather patterns here, you can look and see it coming across, and it could be raining on the mainland and not be raining here. Anyway, I digress, but
No, it's crazy.
I just thought that was a kind of funny little thought that went through my mind. But yeah, getting on to your documentary, I guess that was something that we have been talking about going full circle with that through this program. Like maybe having at the very end of it, actually premiering it in the theater behind me.
Yes.
But that might be a little ways away, so we thought we'd start the process by talking about what you've done so far, and maybe show a couple of clips of us. But what was it, a month and a half ago, we had an interview where you did here in this studio with a doctor on the island that is. So I'll let you get back into talking about how this documentary came about and where you are on it.
Yeah, thank you. So no, this documentary was it's something I had an idea for about I want to say a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. It was, my son was probably about 6 to 8 months old at the time. And we had just been through, honestly, a lot. We found out basically right in 2020 that right after we had both lost our jobs several weeks apart that we were pregnant. And we had been trying, but it hadn't been working up until that point where we both lost our jobs 2 weeks apart. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, this is happening. So we had to figure it out. We, moved out of our place that we were in to stay with my parents for a little bit. So it's not a typical story where you're like, okay, you're pregnant in a pandemic, moved out of our place, moved back in with our parents while we're pregnant, and then, give birth. And we're trying to, find jobs, recover, figure out where we're going to live and what we're going to do. And it was just a really crazy, stressful time. And I, through that process, went through very heavy postpartum depression and anxiety, lost several friends. Um, it was just a very challenging time. And I think there were a lot of times where I would kind of just like beat myself up and be like, wow, like looking at all these failures, feeling like I couldn't do things right. And there was just so much about that time that I didn't even realize so many other moms go through. I think that, I took a step back, and when I came through the storm after, you know, trying to figure it out after my son was born, after I went through physical therapy, his birth had been kind of, his birth was complicated. Um, Going through all of that, I think once, I came to the other side, I was able to look back and look at the path I'd walked. I realized how many other mothers have to, walk that path, and what happens in their marriages, what happens in their relationships, what happens with their health. Um, there are just so many things I think that are overlooked when someone becomes a mother, because societal expectations are, well, you'll just be fine. All the moms before you did it. It's not a big deal.
I think it's
But there is,
probably more common than you think. Not all of the things that you went through, but a lot of those circumstances outside of the pandemic, doing it during a pandemic has a certain extra layer to it. But I know a lot of people that ended up, I think my brother did the same thing. He ended up, moving his family back home, and I think my sister did the same thing. I mean, it's like, and as real estate gets more expensive, that part of it I think is, when you turn to parents for help and things like that. But then there was, a lot of other circumstances that you went through.
yeah, and I think that's the craziest part of it, though, is that I think it's not talked about enough. Um, how common so much of this is. I mean, I've spoken with moms at this point that have also dealt with postpartum depression that felt really alone because they felt like the problem was them. Um, and how would you know that the problem isn't you and that you're not alone if it's not widely talked about, you know?
True.
Um,
And
so
the
I think
interesting thing
that,
about that is too that, and I hope this is part of your documentary, that there's even the medical profession doesn't deal with it in a very positive way. I mean, they kind of like they don't know how to classify it in a different way than they do any kind of mental illness. And so they just, even though it's temporary and caused by hormone changes that will go away, they kind of like treat it in the same way they would if somebody is schizophrenic or something. Like it's different. At least that's the way it was with my own experience going through that.
yeah, I think what's really crazy about postpartum is not even as much your emotions, but how it's treated by the medical community.
Right.
So there are two sides to it, right? I mean, the first is the fact that giving birth itself, like you literally brought life into this world, transformed your whole body. And I know for a fact, like when I gave birth, I had a C-section. I could not, walk. There had again been like certain complications where like I wasn't recovering properly. And I remember just they send you home after 4 days with a baby, and they're like, here you go, take care of
Yeah.
this baby now. Like, you can't walk, but take care of this baby. And you might still be bleeding, and make sure your stitches don't open, but take care of this baby. They don't ask, like, do you have any other kids at home? Can you care for those kids? Do you
Right.
have help yourself? How are you changing your diapers? Do you need physical therapy? They don't ask those questions. And going through a very different surgery, and in, hearing mothers that went through other surgeries, the recovery and the expectation on people is so different when there's not birth involved. And that to me was really wild. Um, Really, really wild. And I think that it's not just that, but the fact that, within the mental health care system, as you were saying, outside of the physical surgery, if there's a woman that is experiencing, severe mental health issues, I remember, one of the moms I spoke to talked to the doctor, and she's like, well, I don't want to kill myself, but I'm really sad. And the doctor just looked at her and said, well, then I guess you're fine. She had severe postpartum depression and
Right.
anxiety and rage that just was not treated because her doctor said, well, if, you're not thinking the darkest thoughts possible, then you must be okay.
Right. The parameters of how they treat it is very boxy,
Yeah.
and I feel like it hasn't changed. It really is just as crazy, and then they you know they wonder why the outcomes are the way they are. Sometimes I think it's a shame. And
Well, and I think the other part of it is too that this documentary really dives into is the reality of motherhood in 2023. And I think that last part is important because, yes, for decades women have been giving birth. Um, and I think in other, times that was their primary, that was their job, right? This was all they did. And in that time, hopefully you would have another female community of other mothers that you would have the village, right? That would surround you for many women. And, it's not to say that having, just being a mother, being your job, like I laugh when people are like, oh, that's all you do. Because it's like, let me tell you, when I was a stay-at-home mom, it was the hardest job I've ever done. And I've worked in a newsroom. This was the hardest job I had ever done with stay home because there's just so much about it that's that you're learning. That's the hardest part. They say it takes 6 months to learn a job, but like you're thrust into it. But at any rate, kind of going back to it, when you look at what the societal expectations are today in 2023. It's not just you're a great wife and mom. It's you're a great wife, you're a great mom, you're a great friend. You also need to work and hold a full-time job. Or, if you're running the household, what's your side hustle? How actively involved are you? Are you taking care of your own mental health, your physical health? You have to look a certain way.
right.
It's like the societal expectations in 2023 are crazy.
I know
And
they are almost worse than it was before in a lot of
right,
ways. It's like, I mean, I always said this about my own wife. I said, and marriage, like, it's for me, it's not even close to 50-50. So she does way more than I do, and she likes it that way. I mean, it's not like I don't try to stay up with what, but I'm incapable of being as much in the as she is in what we do. So that's my own limitations, I guess. But it is kind of daunting that. Oh, where'd you go? There you are.
I'm here.
I can kind of see where you're coming from because I watched my wife do all of those things, and I watched her take them on in a growing way as the kids get older. So that's what you have to look forward to.
It's tough, man. It's tough because it's like, there's this quote that I heard and it was like, well, you're supposed to work like you have no children and parent like you have no job.
Well, that's a good one.
And that was especially tough it was why I left, at this time when, my child, it's why I kind of left working for someone else and started my own company altogether was because I felt constantly caught in the middle because, daycare in this day and age, like if you're going to work, right, and be a working mom, you need childcare. And not only was childcare like an entire paycheck and a half of what one of us made, it was crazy. But it was also the fact that like, and that daycare knows how needed they are, so they can play by their own rules. So you're constantly in this state of if you use daycare or any kind of childcare, you're stuck between your employer and whoever you have for childcare. And we tried everything. I had my mother-in-law help for a while, and other family members helped for a while, but then there came that uncomfortable pull of like, well, I would do it this way, or I want it done this way, or well, if I'm watching them, this is how I'm going to do it. And that became very uncomfortable. And I was like, you know what, for the sake of the relationship, we can't continue this. So there's that aspect of it. We had a nanny, who we loved, but she was very expensive. And if she wasn't available, we were screwed. So that was tough. We did daycare, but then it just cost so much money. And we found out at one point that my son was left unattended in a lobby at one
Excellent.
point. So at that point, I was like, I give up. I tried everything. I've stayed home with him. I've had a nanny. Like I've done every way of parenting possible. And the only way that I found it was going to work for me was by staying home with him and starting my own company and carefully setting boundaries that like, okay, these are mommy's working hours where daddy steps in. And these are, when I'm home with him, we're playing, we're having fun, we're learning, and I'm loving it. But without that balance and carefully adding time for myself and scheduling a date night I couldn't have that balance when I was working a full-time 40-hour work week for anybody else. It wasn't possible to prioritize that with myself, but there are a lot of moms that are still doing it.
So this
So I think,
documentary is multifaceted. Then it's about all of the things that you're facing or
yes.
have faced. Going back to some things that your mother faced when you were born, correct? And tell us
Yeah.
about how you found that doctor that was on the vineyard.
So I'm so happy you brought that up because that was kind of where I was going next. This documentary is a full deep dive into the reality of motherhood from every aspect. And one of the most important things that we lightly touched on, but really, kind of spoke to me was hearing about my mom's, journey of childbirth as we had kind of, talked about in talking about this documentary, talking about what her experience of becoming a mom looks like, because hers looks very different from mine. But hers is not unique, unfortunately. I recently had a conversation with a friend that had experienced loss of her first child, and that was devastating for her and devastating for all of us. I mean, it's unimaginable. And, when she went through it, I went to my mom because my mom had lost several children before me. And, even though she was able to thankfully give birth to me and to my brothers, her journey was really tough. Her first child she had lost, and she wanted to try again so badly. And finally, someone recommended her to see this doctor, Dr. Kurt Citrullo. So she was able to, find him through someone that said, hey, I know this guy. I know you're struggling. If you're really dedicated to giving birth, find him, go to him. This doctor was able to, prepare her and listen to her along the way through her whole pregnancy journey. And the key that he told her was if a mother's intuition says something's wrong, then something's wrong. And I loved that he said that because it's not very well known. It's something in the documentary, but while I was, giving birth to my son via C-section, I told the nurse before I went in, hey, this IV in my arm doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. And she said, oh, it's fine. It's just, and I said, no, it feels something's wrong. And she said, you'll be fine. Just trust me. I do this all the time. Well, as they were doing the C-section, all of a sudden I started feeling like I was going to pass out, really dizzy, didn't feel right. Things weren't right. And they said, okay, like she's crashing. Something's wrong. What's going on? The IV wasn't wrong.
Oh,
They had put in the wrong IV. I had spoken up about that, and she told me to be silent because she knew what she was doing.
Jesus Christ, I didn't hear this story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So there's layers to this. Thankfully, they were able to get an emergency IV in quickly. And because they were able to get it in quickly and they noticed the problem, we were able to be okay. But how many moms get ignored when they're told something is wrong? And, my friend told me her story of loss. She had gone to the doctor, a week prior, and she had said, hey, should we do an extra ultrasound? They said, no, we can hear the heartbeat, you're fine. 9 days later, her baby was gone. They went back and there was no heartbeat. Had they done that ultrasound, I don't know that they would have seen anything different. Nobody knows at this point because you can't go back and check. But the most important thing that Dr. Citrullo really said that resonated was trust a mother's intuition. If a mom says she's anxious about something for a minute, what's it going to cost you to double check? It's going to cost you some time, but it could also, save a baby's life.
Yeah, I've always said there's nothing more strange or true than a woman's intuition. So in general, and when they're, in this situation where they're carrying the baby inside, there's a reason why they're hypersensitive and can feel, because their nature made it that way. So that you could protect. So it should be a no-brainer that you should listen to a woman when she says something doesn't feel right. But yeah, I felt he was. I mean, I was here for that interview, but and it was. I didn't know a lot about your documentary. I still don't really know a ton about it, but he was a very interesting guy to watch. First of all, because I mean, the way he just jumped right into talking about it before even one question was asked. But I'll let you do the intro, and we'll show a couple clips here.
Yeah, so strangely enough, I looked up Dr. Curtis Citrullo, because I was, in the process of producing this documentary. My friend experienced her loss, and I thought to myself, well, what if I can find this doctor? And it just so happens that he happens to live on Martha's Vineyard, Dr. Curtis Citrullo. So we found him, and I was able to, I convinced my mom for a day, didn't tell her what we were doing, but I convinced my mom, hey, come to the island with me for the day. I want you to just come over and we're going to do something. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And I was able to reunite my mom with the doctor that listens to her and saved, was able to make my life possible, because he listened to, every word that my mother said, every anxiety, every worry, every fear, every feeling. He listened to her, and he was able to put her on bed rest a month before I was born. And because of that, after multiple losses, she was able to give birth to me. This is that meeting with Dr. Curtis Citrullo.
This is my wife, Terry.
Hi, Terry. How are you? Tired to the soul.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm Colin.
Hi, Colin.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
How are you?
What's the relationship? So, he was my mom's doctor years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And delivered you?
He did.
Oh, he did a good job.
So, man helps to make my life possible.
That's so nice. Yeah, that's great.
That must be strange to see a grown woman that you delivered the whole year.
No, he sees them all over the island. He
Yeah, that's right, I
started
guess.
out here in 1975.
Yeah, well,
Kind of funny.
I'm at that age now too, where I see. That's it.
That's great. All right.
Thanks.
We're in good hands. But he does need a ride home. You might have to get an Uber or something. I can't.
I have your taxi in my taxi. In fact, one of my good friends from that hospital had a daughter who was a pediatrician. Recently, one of my last patients ever, and she came into labor at 24 weeks. She was a pediatrician, so she knew if she delivered, neither one of these babies would survive. And I kept her in the hospital till 34 weeks. And her father would call me every day, how's she doing, how's she doing? I said, she's doing great. And I taught her how to meditate. And she learned how to meditate and totally relaxed then. I mean, she came in, she was a pediatrician, so she knew exactly what the outcome was going to be if she delivered anytime shortly. And I taught her how to meditate because I had just learned how to do that. And she just became so relaxed and her anxiety just completely disappeared. And it was nice. It was a nice thing. And she wrote me the nicest letter afterwards and sent me a book. And her father was so pleased because he had been sending us patients for years. And all of a sudden it was his daughter. So kind of an interesting story.
That's a wonderful story.
Yeah, that was interesting. It's funny because he just jumped right into, and I don't know if that was where I caught it. I just pulled my cell phone out before the producer was able to get everything set up and for you to be in place to start asking questions. It just kind of like started. He was ready to start talking about things.
Yeah, no, he was ready to go. I mean, that's the best part about, I think that was one of the most rewarding things about being able to meet this man is like, he's every bit as passionate as I had heard that he was, about just, maternal health care and just really taking care of, both the mother and the child. His passion and his dedication is just kind of the standard of, I feel like, what every OB should be. It's so surprising, and it was really refreshing talking with him to hear his take on kind of what the state is of maternal health care now. And he just, I mean, I felt like I could have talked to that man for like 3 days straight and just like not moved. He was great.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I mean, you have to wait for the documentary to come out to see the rest of it, but and then he was talking at there was some surprising answers there. Let's just say so. That was pretty cool. It was a great interview.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to be able to get this all together. It's funny. I keep saying I'm done filming it, and Colin, I don't even think I told you this yet, but I keep being like, "Yep, that's it. I've filmed, all that I'm done. I'm going to edit." Originally, it was supposed to be out at the end of 2023, and I just talked with a woman last week that's doing this really cool project that's going to support moms like in real time. As they're going through situations where, they might be struggling or need support or feel overwhelmed. So she's developing technology that can connect moms in real time with help, so they don't have to wait for an appointment with a therapist or wait for someone to actually talk with them. It can just connect them with other people that can understand and connect and walk them through. And I think that's genius. So I am probably going to be doing just one more interview. Just one more. I keep saying I'm done, and then I'm like, oh, but this person.
Well, like you said, it's an ongoing thing. I mean, they not only technology has changed to the point where access should be immediate. You shouldn't have to wait, especially if you're in crisis. I mean, and you wouldn't in any other situation. If somebody is in crisis, other than postpartum, they are given the opportunity to get help right away. And the only way to do it in postpartum for women is to be committed. It's like the strangest thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's changed much recently, but I sure hope so.
And that's the thing too, is when women are in that state where they're really struggling. I mean, I can say from personal experience, I'm not afraid to share it. I've shared it already on another podcast a bit ago. When women are really struggling in postpartum, that has a huge impact, not just on them, but on their whole family. You think about it, your child is kind of watching that behavior. Your child can see that. They can sense that even if they're very young. They can sense that mom's not okay. Your significant other that has to deal with it, like God bless my husband. I am honestly shocked that I'm still married. But like he dealt with all my mood swings. He had to deal with all the intensity, and even, it's amazing that you see the impact that it has on everyone around you. And I think a lot of people just don't understand. They're like, well, it shouldn't be this hard. Like, it's not that bad. And one thing I didn't know either is that, from the time that you become pregnant, there's something called perinatal anxiety and depression, which is a whole new term that I think a lot of people focus on postpartum. But in the documentary, we also talk about perinatal anxiety and depression, which is something that I was never diagnosed with. But when I look back to my behavior all through my pregnancy, we had a lot of stressful situations. And I'm realizing that I do think that I was suffering from that then as well.
What is it exactly?
So basically, it's the same, a lot of the similar behaviors mirrored by postpartum depression and anxiety. It's just basically having severe depression and anxiety while you're pregnant, because your hormones are basically it's the same thing as postpartum depression and anxiety, except it's while you're pregnant.
Right.
So
not
you can be
post,
suffering
it's
from
peri.
those same
Okay, I
emotions.
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, I mean, it shows how far this needs to continue to, they're still coming up with, new ways to diagnose things. So maybe when after you're done with this documentary as a starting point, I mean, I'm sure that you're going to continue in some way to help. So
Advocate and yell at the top of my lungs for maternal health care reform.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it'll literally be a podcast on this channel at some point
Hey,
called.
I can talk for hours about this. I mean, one of the nice things was we did speak with, I did for this documentary go to the State House, which was wonderful. That was a great experience to be able to speak with a local Massachusetts representative to be able to talk about their work in maternal mental health care reform. It's kind of revolutionizing the state of care, which is one piece of it, right? It's maternal care, it's child care, it's changing societal standards, making sure that physically and mentally the mother is well. Talking about pelvic floor physical therapy, which crazy no one talks about, but I can't think of a mother that wouldn't need it, C-section or not. It's kind of insane the amount of things that I learned just because I was pissed off and asked a lot of questions after I gave birth.
That's how a lot of answers come out, right?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot, and what I found through this journey and talking to other moms and just kind of starting to ask me like, "Does anyone else know this? Anyone else know this?" in mom groups, and they were all like, "Oh, yeah, that's this, yeah, that's that," and I'm like, "What the like?" And no one told me about this. How are you supposed to? This is just what it's supposed to be. Oh no! Like I would like to enjoy. I mean, you think about it, right? And I mean, think about your kids.
Right.
You want to enjoy and soak up all those moments with them. You want to love on them. You want to spend all that time with them, and the focus should be on your relationship and bonding with them. How can you possibly develop a healthy child and a healthy relationship with your child and focus on what's most important if you are sitting there like, well, I have to work, but in order to work, I have to put my child in daycare. In order to put them in daycare, I have to find one that's good and make sure they're not going to neglect them, or find a nanny, or find someone who's going to respect my boundaries. And can I afford that? And are they going to take care of them? And, I have to make sure that, there's not lead in the pouches I'm feeding them, because that was a whole thing. And make sure that they don't get COVID, because we don't know how that's going to impact them. Like all of these crazy things that we've had to think about over the past few years. It's just like, and make sure that, your pelvic floor is okay, you feel physically okay, you're mentally okay, your marriage is okay, your friendships are okay. Like, you put that all on, and it's just like, what are you even asking of people right now?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Just
like,
as decisions alone, like, I mean, and usually it's the moms that have to make them that, are you going to let your kid get this vaccine, or one of the things that was a big one with us was the multiple vaccines at once. And they gave my daughter one, and it was like, her leg had like a softball size lump there. And it's like Jesus. Like is that a money saving thing? Like you're giving 3 at once, so you can charge 3 times, but only have to do work once. Wait, you don't know. So, but that's one of those things that somebody in the family has to make a decision based on, other people's sharing, like you're doing. So
yeah, and it's that research part of it too. Like research takes time. If you think about it, people have entire careers out of being someone who does research, like professional scientists and researchers. Like that's a career. But moms are supposed to do it just because that's part of your job, on top of cooking, cleaning, everything else. And here's the thing. What I don't want to have happen is I don't want to have it be that, I don't want to have it be that people think moms are complaining because we don't love our children. Moms are complaining because we love our children and are tired of spending time with them on the back burner to handle all this other shit that respectfully we shouldn't have to be the only person worrying about it. There should be a doctor advocating for us if we don't seem mentally well. There should be a postpartum visit that checks our pelvic floor so we're not walking around in pain and then overstimulated and angry in front of our child that we should be enjoying that time with. Like there should be support in place, and employers should be understanding that, like, my kid comes first. That shouldn't put my job on the line if my kid is sick, ever.
Yeah.
Like, never, ever. And what's interesting is that I find now there were so many times that I was put in positions where I felt anxious that I was going to lose my job if I didn't have childcare. And what I'm finding now in my meetings with clients that I have in my own business, just today, my child was in the background screaming, "Goldfish! Goldfish! Goldfish!" While I'm on a meeting with a client. And she was like, "You know what? I have several kids. Do you want to take a minute?" And I was like, "Yeah, thank you." And I did, and I came back. And then hers was acting up in the van. And so she was like, "I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "No, don't apologize. Take your time." People understand more than you think.
Yeah.
The fact that raising children is your most
It
important
just happened to
job.
us before the show started.
Yeah, I had
You
that
don't
face
have
like
to
you're
go.
screaming.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, and a lot of people are that way, intolerant. But we're not talking about everybody here, but there's, probably the people that aren't are the ones that don't have kids, but there's room to make everybody happy with the business and with parenting. And I mean, Christ, we're making it work here with the middle of winter from the vineyard.
Right.
So anyway, I think that this was an interesting talk about the documentary, and hopefully we will have another one when he gets a little further along the way, where we can show some clips from the actual documentary, and then, of course, right behind us in the Strand Theater, we're hoping that you'll come and premiere it here when it's done.
I would be so excited to do that. I'm already looking into ordering backdrops.
Nice.
So, once I finish editing, of course, I'm a little ahead of myself, but
Yeah,
but
of course.
yeah.
And I'm asking here on the air of Steve Capers, who is the owner of the theater, kind of like jumping the gun here, but I'm sure he would be happy to have you.
That would be awesome. I would love to do that. And I can think of, honestly, I can think of no better place that would,
Yeah, I know
host
you
it.
have a really great connection with the island and the island with you. And it's so great that the doctor that brought you into the world is living here, and he was
I know.
I know. And I do want to have a secondary interview with that guy to talk about his work with the hospice here on the island, because that was pretty interesting at the end of of your interview. He had some pretty interesting things to say there.
Yeah, that man, I mean, he really is just an advocate. Like, I mean, if he sees anything that can be like positive and beneficial to like any select group of society, I know he was talking about specifically the work of mushrooms, and like the impact that they've been able to have on, healthcare reform.
Well, not
It's
only that, but
incredible.
with the anxieties of people that are approaching, you know, death. Really, that was I think what he was starting to talk about. But of course, it was an end question that he didn't expand on. So it was
Yeah,
just I
I
thought
know.
it was interesting.
The whole conversation with him was great. I mean, Martha's Vineyard is very lucky to be able to have a doctor like Dr. Citrullo, living and working among them. And I think it just was so bad. It was insane to me when I looked up where he was. I was like, all right, well, this doctor could have moved. He could not be practicing. Like, I have no idea where on this planet he could be. And I probably walked past him on the street. Like,
Yeah. That is pretty amazing, because I mean you've got a connection to this island, so for him to be here when you went to look for him is kind of almost like serendipitous. It's weird.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. But I find that, in doing this documentary, I think I'm finding that people are more connected than we all think. Things do happen for a reason. I'm able to see a little bit more clearly now that maybe all the things that I went through in postpartum were so that I can help to advocate and to share these stories to help other parents realize they're not alone, and hopefully to change the narrative of our, opinion of expectations of moms, and to really set appropriate standards so that, when people decide they're going to have a family, you know, everybody in that relationship knows, kind of has a better or more fair idea of what to expect, so they can better prepare themselves to know what
Yeah,
warning signs to look for.
it's not always the fairy tale you think it's going to be. And so I've always said that the parenting is the toughest job you'll ever love. It's like the Peace Corps, right? But it's not easy, and it's not, don't, nobody should go into it thinking that they're, it's going to be great for a little while. It's not. It's a lifetime of commitment, and um, the good and the bad, the ups, the downs. You're in it regardless, and you have to deal with all of the things that happen, not just postpartum, but anything. My kids are in their teens now, and then there's situations that come up now that I mean, my kids are great, but teens are usually a tough time for a lot of families. It's a lifetime commitment, and as you know, and as your mom knows. So
Yeah, and it's funny. I can say I thought I was tough before I had kids. I thought I was tough.
yeah, right. What is it? There's a line from a movie that, yeah, right. There's a line from a movie where they say, I think it was Terms of Endearment, actually, where she said you end up wishing it was that easy. You know that it's going to be tough, but you end up wishing wishing it was that easy. Because it is a level of commitment that people who don't have kids can't really understand.
Yeah, and I think that the only way it's ever gonna, I think that the only way it's ever gonna get to the point where you're able to take all those stressors like off your back and be able to enjoy the most important part. Because I look back and I'm like, man, like I love my son, and I would like to start making changes now so that by the time, if my son chooses to have kids, like by the time it gets to the next generation, hopefully we can do the work now so that when they have children, they can be able to step back and enjoy that time with them without having to worry about so many other things. And the fact that for generations we've just pushed it on the next generation of mothers and parents and just been like, well, this is just how it is. Like, respectfully, no. Why, and why, if you went through that, would you want to push it on to the next generation? No, let's start making some changes around here, because that's not something that I don't want my future daughter-in-law, or, my son, whatever. I don't want my son dealing with this in the future. I don't want my son to have to struggle. I want him to be able to be like, nope, like, it's, everyone understands, and I have a militant community. That way he can focus on what's most important, which is that time with his children.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking about this, and I look forward to the next time that we talk about it, which will probably be, I'm guessing, in the spring after you do quite a bit of editing.
There's lots of editing, yeah. lots of editing, lots of reviewing of footage. Yeah, we're definitely in the thick of it. So I will definitely be giving an update as soon as I can.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Emma, and we'll see you next time on This Week.
Thank you for having me, Colin.